Freedom and independence. One who is not a companion of myriad things has departed the toils of materialism. The mind does not recognize the mind. The eye does not see the eye. Since there is no opposition, when you see forms, there are no forms there to be seen, and when you hear sounds, there are no sounds there to be heard. Is this not departing the toils of materialism? There is no practical pathway into it, no gap through which to see it. Buddhism has no east or west, south or north. One does not say, "You are the disciple, I am the teacher." If your own self is clear, and everything is it, when you visit a teacher, you do not see that there is a teacher. When you inquire of yourself, you do not see that you have a self. When you read Scripture, you do not see that there is a Scripture there. When you eat, you do not see that there is a meal there. When you sit and meditate, you do not see that there is any sitting. You do not slip up in your everyday tasks, yet you cannot lay hold of anything at all. When you see in this way, are you not independent and free? Zen sickness. The spiritual body has 3 kinds of sickness and 2 kinds of light. When you have passed through each one, only then are you able to sit in peace. In the Heroic Progress Discourse, furthermore, Buddha explained 50 kinds of meditation sickness. Now I tell you that you need to be free from sickness to attain realization. In my school, there are only 2 kinds of sickness. One is to go looking for a donkey riding on the donkey. The other is to be unwilling to dismount once having mounted the donkey. You say it is certainly a tremendous sickness to mount a donkey and then go looking for the donkey. I tell you that one need not find a spiritually sharp person to recognize this right away and get rid of the sickness of seeking. So the mad mind stops. Once you have recognized the donkey, to mount it and be unwilling to dismount is a sickness that is most difficult to treat. I tell you that you need not mount the donkey. You are the donkey. The whole world is the donkey. How can you mount it? If you mount it, you can be sure the sickness will not leave. If you don't mount it, the whole universe is wide open. When the 2 sicknesses are gone, and there is nothing on your mind, then you are called a wayfarer. What else is there? That is why when Zhaju asked Nan Quan, "What is the path?" Nan Quan replied, "The normal mind is the path." Now Zhaju suddenly stopped his hasty search, recognized the sickness of Zen masters and the sickness of Buddhas, and passed through it all. After that he traveled all over and had no peer anywhere, because of his recognition of sickness. One day Zhaju went to visit Zhuyu, where he paced back and forth, brandishing his staff from east to west and west to east. Zhuyu asked, "What are you doing?" Zhaju replied, "Testing the water." Zhuyu retorted, "I haven't even 1 drop here. What will you test?" Zhaju left, leaning on his staff. See how he revealed a bit of an example, really quite able to stand out. Zen followers these days all take sickness for truth. Best not let your mind get sick. Facing it directly. If you don't ask, you won't get it. But if you ask, in effect, you've slighted yourself. If you don't ask, how can you know? But you still have to know how to ask before you can succeed. I have struck you right on the top of the head for you to discern the feeling, like lifting up the scab of your moxicottery burn. Spiritually sharp people know immediately. Then, for the first time, they attain the ability to avoid cheating themselves in any way. I'm not fooling you. Remember the story of the ancient warrior who was asked, What was the intention of the Zen founder in coming from India? Amazed, the ancient said, "You ask about the intention of another in coming from India? Why not ask about your own intention?" Then the questioner asked, "What is one's own intention?" The ancient replied, "Observe in hidden actions." The questioner asked, "What are its hidden actions?" The ancient opened and closed his eyes to give an indication. The ancients often took the trouble to talk quite a bit, but their descendants were not like that. They would shout at people the moment they opened the door, with no further whats, hows, or maybes. If you don't understand, there is something that is just so, why not perceive it? In other places, they like to have people look at the model case stories. But here we have the model case story of what is presently coming into being. You should look at it, but no one can make you see all the way through such an immense affair. People spend all their time on thoughts that are nothing but idle imagination and materialistic toil, so wisdom cannot emerge. All conventions come from conceptual thought. What use do you want to make of them? Wisdom is like the sun rising, whereupon everything is illuminated. This is called the manifestation of non-discriminatory knowledge. You should attain this once, and from then on there will be something to work with, and we will have something to talk about. If you indulge in idle imagination and toil over objects, then you have nothing for me to work with. What a laugh! When I talk about the East, you go to the West. When I talk about the West, you go to the East. I can do nothing for you. If you could turn your head around when your insight opened up, you'd be able to say, "After all, it turns out that the teacher has told me, and I have told the teacher." And when the head was shaken, the tail would whip around, everything falling into place. You brag about having studied Zen for 5 or 10 years, but when have you ever done this kind of work? You just pursue fast talk. When you have come to me and I see it as soon as you try to focus on anything, that means your inner work has not yet reached the point of flavorlessness. If you stay here 5 or 10 years and manage to perfect your inner work, then you will awaken. Whenever I teach people to do inner work, what I tell them is all in accord with the ancients, not a word off. Understand, and you will know of the ancients. But don't say, "An ancient spoke thus, and I have understood it thus," for then it becomes incorrect. How about the ancient saying, "It is not the wind moving, not the flag moving, but the mind moving"? How many words here are right or wrong in your own situation? It is also said, "I am you. You are me. Nothing is beyond this." Also, someone asked Yunmen, "What is the student's self?" Yunmen replied, "Mountains, rivers, the whole earth." This is quite good. Are these there or not? If the mountains, rivers, and earth are there, how can you see the self? If not, how can you say that the presently existing mountains, rivers, and earth are not there? The ancients have explained for you, but you do not understand and do not know. I always tell you that what is inherent in you is presently active and presently functioning, and need not be sought after, need not be put in order, need not be practiced or proven. All that is required is to trust it once and for all. This saves a lot of energy. It is hard to find people like this. When my teacher was with his teacher used to say, "This path is a natural subtlety attained by oneself, generally focusing on the existence of innate knowledge." When I saw my teacher, I was unable to express this for 10 years. Just because I wondered deeply, I later attained penetrating understanding, and now do not waste any energy at all. It is not that it is there when you think of it, but not so when you don't. Buddhism is not like this. Don't let the matter under the vestment bury me away. If you do not reflect and examine, your whole life will be buried away. Is there, in fact, anything going on here? Nowadays, there are many public teachers whose guiding eye is not clear. This is very wrong. How dare they mount a pulpit and try to teach others? Showing a symbol of authority, they rant and rave at people without any qualms, simply pursuing the immediate and not worrying about the future. How miserable. If you have connections, you should not let yourself be set up as a teacher as long as you are not enlightened, because this is disaster. If there is something real in you, musk is naturally fragrant. See how many phony Zen masters there are, degenerating daily over a long, long time. They are like human dung, carved into sandalwood icons. Ultimately, there is just the smell of crap. Wishing to get out of birth and death, wishing to attain release, you try to become unified. But one does not attain unification after becoming homogenized. If you try to make yourself unified, you will certainly not attain unification. Once a seeker called on a wayfarer and asked, as they roamed the mountains, an ancient teacher said he sought unification for 30 years without being able to attain it. What does this mean? The wayfarer replied, I too am thus. Then he asked the seeker, understand? He also gave the seeker a poem. The ancient teacher attains unification, and I too am thus. Before the end of this month, I will settle it for you again. At the end of the month, the wayfarer passed away. Tell me about unification. Is it good or bad? The ancient teacher attained unification, and I too am thus. I announce to Zen seekers, facing it directly, don't stumble past. Each of you, go on your way. Not knowing. Sometimes when I question students, they all say they do not know or understand. They just say they eat when hungry and sleep when tired. What redemption is there in such talk? You even say you are not cognizant of whether the month is long or short, and do not care whether it is leap year. Who understands this affair of yours? Now, I ask you, how do you explain the logic of not knowing? You hear others say this, so you say it yourselves. But have you ever understood the principle of not knowing? An ancient said, not knowing means nothing is not known, nowhere not reached. This is called unknowing, so that you people today may reach that unknown state. This is the realm of the sages. How could it be like the blindness and non-understanding that people today call not knowing? If you go on like this, always declaring you don't know and are not concerned, how will you communicate if someone questions you? There might be no one to continue on the road of Zen. It won't do to be like this. Make your choice carefully. Emancipation. In ancient times, a Zen worthy asked an old adept, what is essential for emancipation? The old adept said, fog is rising from your feet, Reverend. At these words, the Zen worthy suddenly got the message. Do you know about emancipation? If you formulate the idea that you can understand, then you are blocked off from it. Later, another adept said, I dare not turn my back on you, Master, for fog is rising from your feet. There is the story of when Bai Wan Tong left Dongshan. Dongshan said, where are you going? Tong replied, into the mountains. Dongshan said, Flying Monkey Ridge is steep, a fine sight. Tong hesitated. Dongshan said, Reverend Tong, Tong responded, "Yes." Dongshan said, "Why don't you go into the mountains?" At these words, Tong suddenly got the message. The ancients were quite direct in their ways of helping others. Whenever people came to them, they would show them. In this case, he said he was going into the mountains. What does this mean? People today do not realize clearly, inevitably making an understanding. By a bit of understanding, they have blocked themselves off. One can only investigate comprehensively through experience. One cannot understand just by intellectual interpretation. Once you have comprehended thoroughly, with unified comprehension, you will no longer doubt. Nevertheless, this is not easy to maintain. If you have entered into it correctly, you will not backslide. Thus, even if you have clarified what can be understood, that is not comparable to seeing what cannot be understood, and also having the ability to maintain it. Then you will always be aware and always be alert. This is why an ancient said, "The normal mind is the path. Can one aim for it? If you try to head for it, you are turning away from it. Seeing as how you are not allowed to head for it, then how do you maintain it? It's not easy." Is this not emancipation? If you seek a state of emancipation, this is what is called a cramp. Xuanxia said, "The whole earth is an eon of hell. If you do not clarify yourself, this is a serious cramp. It will not do to idle away the time." The director. Even if you trust directly in the rightness of reality this very moment, already you are called a dullard. How much the more if you cannot trust directly? What are you good for, then? If you directly trust the rightness of reality, why are you called a dullard? When have you been coming and going all this time? You should know that you've lost one part. Then you see that what you had hitherto not comprehended turns out to be a view that has no relevance to you. As I observed the ancients since time immemorial, there were those who attained enlightenment from confusion. All of their statements are teachings on attaining enlightenment by confusion. Then there are those who came to understand confusion after becoming enlightened. All of their statements are teachings on understanding confusion after becoming enlightened. Then again there are those for whom there is neither confusion nor enlightenment. All their statements are teachings on freedom from both confusion and enlightenment. Next, those who attain enlightenment outside of confusion were also very numerous, so they are not worth talking about. How much less worthwhile are those who neither know enlightenment nor understand confusion? These latter are, properly speaking, merely ordinary mortals. In ancient times, only a few people such as Nan Quan and Guizhong could be referred to as having vision free of both confusion and enlightenment. Students nowadays run off at the mouth talking about freedom from both confusion and enlightenment, but when have they actually arrived at it? Don't say things like that too easily. Since you still have doubts, now I will ask you something. When you were first conceived in your mother's womb, what did you bring with you? You had nothing whatsoever when you came, just mental consciousness, with no shape or form. Then when you die and give up the burden of the physical body, again you will have nothing, at all, but mental consciousness. At present, in your travels and community life, this is the director. Now let me ask you something. We receive portions of energy from our father and mother through the sperm and the egg. Clinging to what we receive, we call it our body. From the time of birth, as it gradually grows and matures, this body always belongs to the self. But tell me, does it belong to you or not? If you say it belongs to you, when first conceived you had nothing with you. When did the sperm and egg of your father and mother ever belong to you? Life can last 100 years at most. Furthermore, before the corpse is abandoned, when did it ever belong to you? And yet, if you say it doesn't belong to you, right now there is no possibility of taking anything away. When it is reviled, you anger. When it is pained, you suffer. How could it not belong to you? Try to determine whether you have anything there or not, and you will find you cannot determine, because your root of doubt is not cut through. If you say you have something there, while during the process of growth from birth up to the age of 20, there is no change in this certainty. But when you get to be 40 or 50, the body changes and deteriorates from moment to moment, so you cannot say it is definitely there. But if you say there is nothing there, nevertheless you can perform all sorts of actions, so you cannot say there is nothing. Once upon a time a man lost his way on a journey, and so he lodged in a vacant cottage. That night a ghost came, carrying a corpse. Then another ghost came and said, "That's my body." The first ghost said, "I got it over yonder." Then the second ghost snatched it away by force. The first ghost said, "There's a traveler here who can stand witness." So the two ghosts approached the man and said, "Who brought this corpse?" The traveler reflected. Both of the ghosts are evil. At least one of them is sure to hurt me. I've heard that if one avoids telling a falsehood when facing death, one will be born in heaven. So he pointed to the first ghost and said, "This ghost brought it." Enraged, the second ghost tore out the traveler's arms and legs. Now the first ghost, repentant and grateful, said, "Your word of testimony for me has crippled you." So the first ghost used the corpse to patch the man up. The parts were again taken by the second ghost, and the first ghost repaired the man once again. Finally, both ghosts wound up on the ground, trying to eat the man's flesh as fast as they could, each one trying to get more than the other. When all the man's flesh had been consumed, the ghosts left. Now the traveler saw his parents' bodies right in front of his eyes, already devoured by the ghost. Then he gazed upon his own changed body and wondered what it was. Is it me? Is it not me? Is it something? Is it nothing? He went crazy thinking about these things and bolted off into the night. Eventually he came to a cloister. There he saw a mendicant, to whom he related the foregoing events. The mendicant saw that he would be easy to teach and to liberate, because he already knew that his body was not his possession. So the mendicant gave the traveler a summary of the teaching, and he actually attained enlightenment after that. You people just talk about studying Zen by bringing up stories as if that were Buddhism. What I am talking about now is the marrow of Zen. Why do you not wonder, find out, and understand in this way? Your body is not there, yet not nothing. Its presence is the presence of the body in the mind, so it has never been there. Its nothingness is the absence of the body in the mind, so it has never been nothing. Do you understand? If you go on to talk of mind, it too is neither something or nothing. Ultimately, it is not you. The idea of something originally there now being absent, and the idea of something originally not there now being present, are views of nihilism and eternalism. Saving energy. Generally speaking, practical application of Zen requires detachment from thoughts. This method of Zen saves the most energy. It just requires you to detach from emotional thoughts and understand that there is nothing concrete in the realms of desire, form, and formlessness. Only then can you apply Zen practically. If you try to practice it otherwise, it will seem bitterly painful by comparison. Once there was a disciplinarian monk who had kept the precepts all his life. As he was walking one night, he stepped on something that squished, which he imagined to be a frog, a mother frog laden with eggs. Mortified at the thought of having killed a pregnant frog, When the monk went to sleep that night, he dreamed that hundreds of frogs came to him demanding his life. He was utterly terrified. Come morning, the monk went to look for the frog he had squashed, and found that it had only been an overripe eggplant. At that moment, the monk's perplexities abruptly ceased. Realizing there is nothing concrete in the world, for the first time he was really able to apply it practically in life. Now I ask you, when he stepped on it by night, was it a frog or an eggplant? If it was a frog, yet when he looked at dawn, it was an eggplant. If it was an eggplant, yet there were frogs demanding his life the night before. Can you decide? I'll try to decide for you. Feelings of frogs may be shed, but the idea of eggplant remains. If you would be free of the idea of eggplant, strike the evening chime at noon. The most direct approach. Why don't you understand the essence that has always been there? There is not much to Buddhism. It only requires you to see the way clearly. It does not tell you to extinguish random thoughts or suppress body and mind, shutting your eyes and saying this is it. The matter is not like this. You must observe the present state. What is its logic? What is its guiding pattern? Why are you confused? This is the most direct approach. How about when I have not spoken to you, and you have not heard me? Is there any point in coming and going? At such time, do not make up forced rationalizations. From the Buddhas above to the totality of beings below, all is thus. In this sense, sages and ordinary people are equal. Wrong and right are equal. Samsara and nirvana are equal. Now I ask you, whose business are the ancient Buddhas, and the generations of past, present, and future? Whose business are the contaminated lands of the 10 directions? I say, if you understand all this 30 years from now, you will realize that I did tell you. Just don't say, this is it. If you do, that is called the view of an outsider. Asleep. Right now, if you are questioned and cannot speak, where is the fault? It is generally because of seeing forms where there is no form, hearing a voice where there is nothing said, forcing rationalizations where there is no reason, asserting control where there is no control. If you cannot get rid of this, that is referred to as diseased eyes still there, flowers in the sky fall in confusion. Why? Just because mind is still there, so you cannot speak. There is not much to Buddhism. It only requires you to make a statement plainly and simply. That is all. But what is a plain and simple statement? If someone asked me, I'd say, it's already become 2 statements. Understand? An ancient said, the Buddhas and Zen masters have given a clear and detailed explanation of what is beyond words, but most of those who get here are confused, muddled, and uncomprehending. If you don't see this, you are asleep on your feet. You are always in the light, and yet you do not know it, even with your eyes open. How do you expect me to do anything for you? No seeing. When I bring up one thing and another for you as I do, you think I am explaining Zen, but the minute you go into action, you make it into worldly convention. Only if you keep your attention on it will you be able to make a discovery. But as I see, most of you just remain in eyes and ears, seeing and hearing, sensing and feeling. You've already missed the point. You must find the non-discriminatory mind without departing from the discriminating mind. Find that which has no seeing or hearing without departing from seeing and hearing. This does not mean that no seeing is a matter of sitting on a bench with your eyes closed. You must have non-seeing right in seeing. That is why it is said, live in the realm of seeing and hearing, yet unreached by seeing and hearing. Live in the land of thought, yet untouched by thought. Independence. What do you people come to me for? Each individual should lead life autonomously. Don't listen to what other people say. An ancient declared, I knew how to lead life by the time I was 18. You people must learn to live independently. You say, lead what life? Just do not seek elsewhere. Most people today are compulsively active. This is already not knowing how to lead life. This is called abandoning home, scattering the family, and becoming a drifter. Clearly, this is not understanding. Just searching and seeking, studying a bit of intellectual knowledge, memorizing a few sayings, is called hauling manure inside. When you get here, your actions have to be truly accurate. Eventually it will sink in thoroughly, and then you will understand. An ancient said, everywhere is you. Go east, it's you. Go west, it's you. Who are you? If you say me, this is emotional and intellectual consciousness, which you must pass through before you attain realization. In ancient times, Vashubandhu asked Asanga, Elder brother, when you went to the inner palace, what teaching did Maitreya expound to you? Asanga replied, he expounded this teaching. Now tell me, what teaching is this? You must be able to discern it before you can realize it. Don't fix recognition on this. Many people have been fooled by the term this. That is why they speak of illness as if it were medicine. Therefore, we say they are pitiful. Learning Zen. You must be attuned 24 hours a day before you can attain realization. Have you not read how Lingyan suddenly turned into this reality on seeing peach blossoms? How Zhang Yan set his mind at rest on hearing the sound of bamboo being hit? An ancient said, if you are not in tune with this reality, then the whole earth deceives you. The environment fools you. The reason for all the mundane conditions abundantly present is just that this reality has not been clarified. I urge you for now to first detach from gross mental objects. 24 hours a day, you think about clothing, think about food, think all sorts of various thoughts, like the flame of a candle burning unceasingly. Just detach from gross mental objects, and whatever subtle ones there are will naturally clear out, and eventually you will come to understand spontaneously. You don't need to seek. This is called putting conceptualizations to rest and forgetting mental objects, not being a partner to the dusts. This is why the ineffable message of Zen is to be understood on one's own. I have no Zen for you to study, no doctrine for you to discuss. I just want you to tune in on your own. The only essential thing in learning Zen is to forget mental objects and stop rumination. This is the message of Zen since time immemorial. Did not one of the patriarchs say, freedom from thought is the source, freedom from appearances is the substance? If you just shout and clap, when will you ever be done? The basis of awareness. Expand enlightenment, and the mind is always calm. Go along with things, and consciousness runs at a gallop. I only wish to be rich in enlightenment, though personally poor, generous with virtue, though emotionally aloof. Here I am thus every day, thus all the time. But tell me, what is thus? Try to express it outside of discriminatory consciousness, intellectual assessments, and verbal formulations. This reality is not susceptible to your intellectual understanding. Now those who think, attend, and reflect all have some intellectual understanding. But then when they turn back to examine their own eyes and think of the mind that thinks, at this point, why do people unknowingly say, "It has never been blue, yellow, red, or white. It has no appearance, no form"? I tell you, this is what I call talk. It is not your original mind. How can you think of your original mind? How can you see your own eye? When you are looking inward, furthermore, there is no seeing subject. Some people swallow this in one gulp. So their eye of insight opens wide, and they immediately arrive at their homeland. How can people nowadays reach the point where there is no seeing and no hearing? Everything is always there. You see people, houses, all sorts of forms, like boiling water bubbling. When you were infants, you also heard sounds and saw forms, but you didn't know how to discriminate. Once you came to the age of reason, then you listened to discriminatory thinking, and from that time on have suffered a split between the primal and the temporal. At this point it is inevitably hard for people to restore natural order, even if they want to. Those who attain enlightenment do not see walking when they walk, do not see sitting when they sit. That is why Buddha said, the eye seeing forms is equivalent to blindness. The ear hearing sounds is equivalent to deafness. How can we say we are as if blind and deaf? When we hear sound, there is no sound to be heard. When we see form, there is no form to be seen. What we see and hear is all equivalent to an echo. It is like seeing all sorts of things in a dream. Is there all that when we wake up? If you say yes, yet there's only a blanket and pillow in the bed. If you say no, yet all those things are clearly registered in your mind, and you can tell what they were. The same is true of what you see and hear now in broad daylight. So it is said, what can be seen by the eye or heard by the ear can be studied in the scriptures and treatises. But what about the basis of awareness itself? How do you study that? Just being there. Where is Shakyamuni, the Buddha? What? What? Where is Bodhidharma, founder of Zen? Just there. How do you explain the logic of just being there? It's unavoidably hard to clarify. If you can clarify this, you will finally know that true reality is always there. Many Zen specialists say, the mention itself is it. Then what about when you're dying or too sick to speak? It is necessary to penetrate this experientially before you'll get it. Have you not read how a seeker asked Deshan, "Where have the ancient sages gone?" Deshan said, "What? What?" Does that mean that what is itself the sages? You people either interpret literally or else fall into conventional echoes of what is said. If you don't fall into echo-like expressions, then you fall into wordlessness and speechlessness. This reality you actually cannot figure out by conceptual interpretations. If you keep any of that on your mind, it turns into an inclination, alienating you from yourself. Even if you try to attain harmony by means of mystic devices and wondrous doctrines, you will certainly be unable to do so. If you do not think at all, though, that won't work either. You must personally experience it before you will attain clear vision with no doubt. Mind itself. Let me give you an illustration. People have eyes, by which they can see all sorts of forms, like short and long, square and round, and so on. Then why do they not see themselves? Just perceiving forms, you cannot see your eyes, even if you want to. Your mind is also like this. Its light shines perceptibly throughout the 10 directions, encompassing all things. So why does it not know itself? Do you want to understand? Just discern the things perceived. You cannot see the mind itself. An ancient said, "The knife does not cut itself. The finger does not touch itself. The mind does not know itself. The eye does not see itself." This is true reality. Seeing through. You people have been standing here for quite a while. Have you seen a single real teacher yet? Don't keep on standing there for nothing. I am only what I call a provisional elder. An ancient sage said apropos of this, just using provisional terminology to guide people. Buddha was an old Indian mendicant who did not trouble you to discriminate appearances and grasp forms. What is Shakyamuni, the Buddha? Who is Bodhidharma, the founder of Zen? Was there any Buddhism before the founder came here? How can you say there was none? If you say there was none, that is just self-deception. When Bodhidharma was facing a wall for 9 years, were there so many verbal teachings in public cases? To see through in this way is a very economical shortcut. When you had not come here, I had not seen you, and you had not seen me. If you do not see me and I do not see you, how can there be discernment and clarification? If you can attain clarification, what else is the matter? Before Buddha appeared in the world, it was thus. After Buddha appeared in the world, it was also thus. And after Buddha passed away, it was still thus. If you arrive at this state of thusness, there is really nothing the matter at all. As you people go about your daily activities and take care of your needs as they arise, how can you say there is nothing the matter? Only those who have actually seen it can know it is so. In ancient times, when Kasyapa the elder paid respects to the Buddha at the assembly on Spiritual Peak, on seeing the vast crowd in a state of dignified composure, he had an insight and said, "This immense crowd here now is as if it had never been. You tell me, what does this mean?" A while ago, you people were in your own places, where you didn't see so many people. Now that you're here, clearly you see a considerable number of people. How can you say they are as if they had never been? In olden times, a certain old adept asked the seeker, "Where have you just come from?" The seeker replied, "The city." The adept said, "Where are you now?" The seeker said, "The mountains." The adept said, "I have a question to ask you. If you can answer, you may stay. If not, then leave. Now then, when you left the city was lacking you. When you came to the mountains had you extra. If you are absent in the city, the reality of mind is not universally omnipresent. If you are an extra in the mountains, then there is something outside of mind." The seeker had nothing to say. If you can comprehend this, as it is said, You will fall not into nihilism or eternalism. Your sixth sense faculties will be peaceful, and you will be tranquil and quiet, whether active or still. One mind unborn, myriad entanglements cease. Otherwise, if you are not like this, you fall into nihilism or eternalism, depending on being or non-being. This is like running away from home. At this point, I really do not tell you to extend the slightest bit of effort. You will then get an understanding in this way. If you want to harmonize with this reality, making it so there is no gap, then you have already split away from it. When I contemplated this matter in the past, I used to think it would take 2 or 3 lifetimes to attain enlightenment. Later, on hearing that someone had awakened, or someone had an insight, I realized that people today can also become enlightened. At times when it is possible to minimize involvements, study yourself clearly. This is very important. Speaking effectively. If someone should question you, how would you speak? Can you speak effectively? If you can only speak after thinking and concentrating, what use is your statement? At midnight, how do you speak? Getting up at dawn, how do you speak? In the hallway, in the washroom, how do you speak? Can you speak effectively? Your eyes must be clear before you can. Naked realization. Just now an assistant came and announced that the rain isn't stopping, and people may not be able to hear if a meeting is held in the rain. Suppose the rain stopped right now. Then would you hear? I say it's best when the rain doesn't stop. Why? Because you are not deliberately trying to listen. How about when they say the sound of the rain has given you a sermon? Is that correct? I do not agree. The sound of the rain is you giving a sermon. But do you understand? Clarify it directly. Then what else is there? People who go journeying to study Zen today should bring a statement to harmonize with the teacher. Why do you pain yourself and cramp yourself as you do? Let me also ask you, what teacher would you harmonize with? If you want to harmonize with the teacher, just get to know your own mind. Now let me ask you, what is your mind, and how do you know it? Here you cannot force an understanding. You must actually look inward and discover it. The ancients had no choice but to make provisional explanations where there is no explanation, skillfully employing expedient means where there are no expedients. One day when Zhuangcha went to the mountains, he encountered a tiger. His assistant told him there was a tiger there. But Zhuangcha just said, "It's your tiger." Now, with mountains and rivers crisscrossing the land, domains of existence everywhere, discriminating thoughts branching off in 1,000 ways and diverging in 1,000,000 ways, how can you explain this logic of, "It's yours"? If you don't understand this, you will be fatally obstructed everywhere. It's just because you have been following material senses and been influenced by things since time immemorial. You try to point out what are things and what are you. This is why a seeker asked Zhuangcha, "I have just entered the community. Please show me a way of access." Zhuangcha said, "Do you hear the sound of the valley stream?" The seeker said, "Yes." Zhuangcha said, "Gain access from here." Nowadays people do not clearly understand this story, simply saying, "The essence of mind is omnipresent. Who else hears?" What relevance has this sort of discourse? You must be completely naked before you will attain realization. For now I ask you, have you dressed? You can be so shameless. Seeing mind. As soon as you rationalize, it's hard to understand. You must refrain from rationalization before you can attain realization. Hearing such talk, some people immediately declare, "I have nothing to say at all, and no reason either." They do not realize this is in fact a rationalization. I will settle something for you right now. The ultimate rule is to see your own mind clearly. This is what Buddhism is, as far as I'm concerned. An ancient said, "The mind does not know itself, the mind does not see itself. So how can you see it clearly?" Even though it's your own mind, it's hard to see. All the sages since time immemorial have been people who clearly saw their own minds. My late teacher was someone who saw his own mind, but among those here, who were also associated with him in the past, there are very few who clearly see their own minds. Mind does not see mind. To get it, you must not see it as mind. This is a realm apart from thoughts. Now, if I say this to people, they think I am criticizing everyone else. But if I do not talk about it, it will be hard to elucidate. Zen teachers of a certain type say to people, "Fools, why don't you understand this thing?" First they make a cliché of your own mind, then try to use the mind to realize it. This is called driving a spike into a stump and then running round and round the stump. They pass it on this way, and it is taken up this way, knocking on their chairs and holding up their whisks. This is called trying to use the mind by means of the mind. There is another type of Zen teacher who tells people not to make logical assessments, that they lose contact the minute they speak, and should recognize the primordial. This kind of teacher has no explanation at all. This is like sitting on a balloon. Where is there any comfort in it? It is also like the croaking of a bullfrog. If you entertain such a view, it is like being trapped in a black fog. I am exhorting you to utter seriousness. I am not lying. I am not making up rationalizations to trap people. I will not allow people to oppress the free. I have no such reasons. If you recognize this, that is up to you. If you say you also see this way, that is up to you. If you say that everything is all right according to your perception, that is up to you. If you say your mind is still uneasy, that is up to you. You can only attain realization if you don't deceive yourself. There are quite a few Zen teachers in the world talking about Zen, talking about Tao. Do you think they are self-deceived or not self-deceived? Do you think they are deceiving others or not deceiving others? It is imperative to discern minutely. In the old days, when I was in the school of my late teacher, I once accepted an invitation to go somewhere. On my way, I ran into a downpour and slipped into the mud. Feeling annoyed, I said to myself, "I am on the journey, but have been unable to attain Zen. I haven't eaten all day, and now have to endure this misery too." Then I happened to hear two people ranting at each other. "You're still annoying yourself." When I heard this, I suddenly felt overjoyed. Then I realized I couldn't find the state where there is no annoyance. That was because I couldn't break through my feeling of doubt. It took me 4 or 5 years after that to attain this knowledge. Now you should exercise your attention in this way. I have brought up the saying that inanimate things teach, but many are those who misunderstand. When you see inanimate things, you say they are inanimate, and when you see animate things, you consider them animate. If you who study Zen do not understand the teaching of the inanimate, how can you understand the task of the journey? If those who act as teachers do not understand the teaching of the inanimate, how can they deal with people in beneficial ways? I urge you to examine closely enough to effect an awakening. If you do not yet have an awakening perspective, then approach it in a relaxed manner. Do not rush. Show the truth. An ancient said, "There is no drum sound in a bell, and no bell sound in a drum." How can students today manage to reach this state? Sometimes when I give personal interviews, you make a statement. And then when I press you further, you merely insist you have already replied. And there could be nothing else. Quite clearly, if you work in this way, you have not got a grip on the matter at all. Idiots! Haven't you read the sayings of ancient sages? Show the truth in every word. Refer to the source in every statement. You do not yet understand. You just adopt positions at random. Don't be like this anymore when you come for interviews. While it can be said you do not understand, you can be straightened out. Real Zen. Those who claim to be Zenists must trust in what people who know say before they will attain it. If you do not believe, you make all talk useless. If you just listen without believing to the talks of people who know, how can you be called Zenists? Real Zenists understand it all. When the grass bends in the breeze, when the dust rises in the wind, they discern immediately before any signals have occurred, before falling into trains of thought, before anything stirs. Only then can one be called a Zenist. Why? This thing is used against birth and death, so you have to be someone who's not far off in order to get it. Haven't you read how Yun Yan studied with Bejan for 20 years without clarifying this matter? His elder brother, Dao Wu, bit his finger to the quick out of concern for him. See how that man of old still did not worry even though he hadn't clarified this matter, saying he did not understand? His will never gave out, and he didn't go chasing after verbal expressions either. And how about Master Zhu Fing, who went to Tutsi 3 times and Dongshan 9 times? When he was at Tutsi school one day, he rolled up the screen and entered the hermitage. When Tutsi saw him coming, he got off his bench and stood. Zhu Fing hesitated, searching for something to say. Tutsi pushed him out. Zhu Feng could only cry. Later, when he went to Dongshang, he was still unable to understand. Then went to Deshan, he asked, "Has the student a part to the enlightenment of the sages of time immemorial?" Deshan hit him and exclaimed, "What are you saying?" At that, Zhu Feng's mind opened up, like a bucket with the bottom fallen out. When he got to Tortoise Mountain, however, he said he still had some doubt. See how that man of old would not rest until his mass of doubt had been broken up? So it is said, the task done, the mind rests. This actuality, after all, is everywhere you find it. Nowadays, most Zen students create interpretations based on words, arbitrarily assuming mastery. Or else they take stories of the ancients' awakenings and look at them, calling this gazing at sayings. What relevance is there? When Zhu Feng went to Tutsi 3 times and Dongshan 9 times, do you suppose he did it for the sake of words? You should simply step back and study through total experience. How do you step back? I am not telling you to sit on a bench with your eyes closed, rigidly suppressing body and mind like earth or wood. That will never have any usefulness, even in 1,000,000 years. When you want to step back, if there are any sayings or stories you don't understand, place them in front of you. Step back and see for yourself. why you don't understand. Professional monks say, thinking will not do. Not thinking will not do either. Then how do they teach people to contemplate? I tell you, just step back and look. Phew. Sure gives people trouble. Sure is hard to understand. But look here, what is it that troubles people? Who is it that troubles anyone? Step back and look in this way. Gradually you will wake up. With each passing day, illumination will expand and enlarge. And yet you should not fanatically recognize this alone and immediately claim perfect attainment, for then you are dependent and fixated. Then it will be ineffectual. You must apply some wisdom in your observation. The ancients allowed you to focus on a route. If you stop and step back in this way, I guarantee there is a reason. This is what is considered incomprehensible and not susceptible to knowledge. There is also a type who talks wildly and speaks at random, questioning this and that. Again, just step back and look. What is it that talks wildly and speaks randomly? Just turn your attention around and reflect. Go on working like this, and eventually you will be sure to awaken. If you don't believe it, there's nothing I can do about that. When I first called on a certain teacher, he taught me to contemplate this saying, "What is the great meaning of Buddhism?" Next to the city of the king of Chu, the river flows eastward. He also taught me to contemplate the saying, "It's not the movement of the wind, nor the movement of the flag, but the movement of your mind." Then when I left and went to call on teachers all over the land, I asked them questions. The ancients were wholly true to reality, and the old teachers explained in countless ways, but I simply could not understand. Finally, I left to travel in eastern China, but halfway there I turned around and came back. Now I was told to contemplate the story. If you kill your parents, you repent before Buddha. If you kill Buddha, where do you repent? Yunman said, "Exposed." This case study is like a hot iron ball in the mind, and I suffered all kinds of trouble for 7 years. Those of you who have studied Zen for a long time will know what I mean. Let me tell you another story. When Wei Tang started to study Zen, he first saw Yung Fing Wei. For 3 years he could not understand what Yung Fing was talking about. He also studied with Zen Master Nan, and after 2 years still did not understand. Then he went to spend a summer retreat in a cloister. In Transmission of the Lamp he read the story where someone asked Duo Fu, "What is the bamboo grove of Duo Fu?" He replied, "1 cane, 2 canes slanted." At this, Wei Tang finally opened up and awakened. Nowadays, people just call these dialogues. This is because of lack of precision in applying effort, failing to understand the expedient devices of the ancients. I urge each of you, since you are already in society, to study the path independently, not spending any time uselessly, taking enlightenment as your rule. Wonder. Association with good companions is a serious recommendation of the ancient sages. Students today should follow the word of the Buddhas and the patriarchs by finding a teacher to attain discernment. Otherwise, how can you call yourselves students? If you want to clarify this matter, you must arouse wonder and look into it. If you wonder deeply about this matter, transcendental knowledge will become manifest. Why? The task of the journey just requires the sense of doubt to cease. If you do not actively wonder, how can the sense of doubt cease? My teacher was 35 years old before he became a monk. He stayed in the city of Chengdu to listen to the lectures on the 100 phenomena as only representation. There he heard a saying of how when a Buddhist enters the path of insight, knowledge and principle merge, environment and mind join, and there is no distinction between that which realizes and that which is realized. A Hindu challenged the Buddhist. If there is no distinction between what realizes and what is realized, what is used as proof? No one can answer this challenge, so the Buddhists were declared the loser in debate. Later, the Buddhist canonical master of Tang came to the rescue of the doctrine. When knowledge and principle merge, environment and mind unite. It is like when drinking water, one spontaneously knows whether it is cool or warm. Now my teacher thought, it may be cool or warm, all right, but what is this business of spontaneous knowing? He wondered and questioned very deeply. He asked the lecturer about the principle of spontaneous knowing, but the lecturer couldn't answer. Instead he said, if you want to clarify this principle, I cannot explain it. But in the South there are adepts who have found out the source of the enlightened mind. They know about this matter. You will have to journey for it. So my teacher went traveling. He went to the capital city and all around the eastern riverlands, asking every Zen adept he could find about this matter. And everyone he asked gave him a reply. Some explained, some spoke in aphorisms. In any case, his feeling of doubt remained unbroken. Later he came to Fushan. Seeing that everything Fushan said in lectures and interviews was relevant to what was in his mind, he wound up staying for a year. Fushan had him contemplate the phrase, Buddha had a secret saying, Kasyapa didn't conceal it. One day, Fushan said to him, why didn't you come earlier? You should go call on Baiyun Duan. So, my teacher went to Baiyun. One day, when he went into the teaching auditorium, all of a sudden he realized great enlightenment. Buddha has a secret saying, Kasyapa didn't conceal it. Of course. Of course. When knowledge and principle merge, environment and mind unite. It is like when one drinks water, one spontaneously knows whether it is warm or cool. How true these words are. Then he composed a verse on his attainment. At an idle patch of field before the mountains, politely I questioned an aged grandfather. How many times have I sold and bought myself? Charmingly, the pine and bamboo draw a clear breeze. When Baiyun read this, he nodded. Is this not a case of doubting and wondering profoundly, approaching people who know, and only then succeeding in clarification? What about the travels of my late teacher calling on teachers? Why did he later say he questioned an aged grandfather? What about selling and buying oneself? What is that? You should realize there is no excess. What the man of old said is all you. He also said, I have never had a single statement to reach you. If I had a statement to reach you, what use would it be? Do you want your feeling of doubt broken? You too must be like my late teacher once before you can accomplish it. Keep evolving. If you have just now understood, where is that which you couldn't understand before? If you can't understand now, when will you understand? Just examine over and over in this way, and you should come to understanding. That is why it is said, what you misunderstood before is what you now understand, and what you now understand is what you misunderstood before. It also said, when light comes, darkness vanishes. When knowledge comes into play, confusion is forgotten. But can it actually be so? How can it be so? That would mean there is darkness to be destroyed and there is confusion to be removed. Have you not read the ancient saying, don't change the former person, just change the former behavior? You Zen followers say, what is the difficulty? Misunderstanding is this person, and understanding is this person. There can be no other. But then, when asked what this person is, you are helpless, or else you talk at random. This is because of not having attained truly accurate realization. This is a disease that has entered your bones and marrow. People in air attach recognition to a lifetime of cessation. Indeed, they stop not only for one lifetime, but for 1,000 lifetimes, myriad lifetimes. As for the spiritually sharp, they should know how to experientially investigate who this person is, directly seeking an insight. Phew, Buddhism today is lackluster. Even in large groups, it's hard to find suitable people. As long as you people are here studying the path in this school, you should not waste the 24 hours of a day. Focus on attaining insight. You people are still not far off. Have you not read how Linji said, there is a true person of no rank in the naked mass of flesh, always going out and coming in the doors of your senses? Those who haven't witnessed it, look. At that time, a student came forward and asked, what is the true person of no rank? Linji got out of his chair, grabbed the student, and said, speak! Speak! The student hesitated, trying to think of something, so Linji pushed him away. Linji also said, your eyes radiate a light that shines through the mountains and rivers. The ancients were so compassionate, yet people today don't take it to heart. So they need to look for someone to find certainty. Have you not read how Yantu, Jufing, and Jinshan went to Linji, then met Elder Ding on the way? Yantu asked, where are you coming from? Ding said, from Linji. Yantu inquired, is your teacher well? Ding said, the teacher has passed away. Yantu said, we came especially to pay respects to the teacher Linji, but now we hear he has passed away, and we do not know what he said. Please quote an example or two of his sayings. Ding then cited the foregoing story about Linji's saying, there is a true person of no rank in the mass of naked flesh, always going out and coming in through the doors of your senses. Those who have not witnessed it, look. When a student came forward and asked what the true person of no rank is, Linji got off his chair, grabbed the student, and said, speak! Speak! When the student hesitated, trying to think of something to say, Linji pushed him away and said, what a dry turd the true person of no rank is. Then Linji went back to his quarters. Hearing this recital, Yantu was stunned. Jinshan remarked, why didn't he say, in the mass of naked flesh is not a true person of no rank? Ding grabbed him and said, tell me, how far apart are a true person of no rank and not a true person of no rank? Speak quickly! Jinshan's face paled, then clouded. Yantu and Zhufing both said, please, forgive this novice for insulting you, Elder. Ding remarked, if it hadn't been for you two old guys, I'd have punched this little bedwetter out. Look, when Jinshan said, not a true person of no rank, why did Ding not agree? How can students today reach such a state? They just recognize the mortal body and
forcibly act as if they were in charge, unable to let go of it. Now I will cite some stories for you to consider. Zhu Fing called on Tutsi and asked, "Is there anyone to call on here?" Tutsi threw down his hoe. Zhu Fing said, "Then I'll dig right where I am." Tutsi said, "Dullard." Even though he said he would dig right where he was still called a dullard. When the great elder Nanji met Zhu Fing, their conversation was in complete accord. Zhu Fing sent him to see Zhuan Sha. Zhuan Sha asked, "An old ancient said, 'Only I can know this.' How do you understand?" Nanji said, "You should realize there is someone who does not seek to know." Zhuan Sha said, "You are a great elder. Why go to so much trouble? What is the logic of this?"
When my late teacher was in the school of Master Beidwan, the master cited the ancient saying, "It is like a mirror casting images. When an image is formed, where has the shine of the mirror gone?" At the time, there were a number of students in the group who offered replies, but the master did not accept any of them. In those days, my teacher was working as a fundraiser. When he came back, Beidwan cited the foregoing, saying and asking him about it. My teacher approached, offered greetings, and said, "Still not far off." Beidwan clapped and laughed. Everyone thought Beidwan was pressing to make him chief fundraiser. What kind of talk is that?
Here I only require you to study the path. Your first priority, 24 hours a day, should be to get rid of unenlightened egotism towards others. Why? Egotism towards others is the business of mediocrities. My late teacher never had any egotism toward others. As his assistant, I saw quite a lot, but I never saw him have a single thought of annoyance. Once, when he was at He Hui, there was a certain senior monk serving as superintendent of hospitality. When my late teacher sent a great elder to lead the community at Si Hai, he had the superintendent of hospitality escort him. The senior spat in my teacher's face and said, "Who are you to tell me to escort him?" He kept on with his vile talk, so my teacher finally gave up. No one knew about this. Later, when my teacher came to Daiping, he nominated that individual to be keeper of the treasury and also made him assembly leader. My teacher himself asked to be made superintendent of the institution and even nominated the other for the abbacy there at Daiping. The governor did not approve of this appointment, and the superintendent reviled my teacher, saying he did not support him strongly enough. Now my teacher finally spoke out. "This fellow," he said, "has hollered at me twice. By this, we can see he had no egotism towards others." People now want to understand theoretically at once, as soon as anything is said. How can you learn the way in this fashion? Sometimes I see beginners come to interviews helpless to do anything about the fact that I have already seen through them. They are like villagers armed with carrying poles trying to do battle with a general. Here I am, fully equipped. In my hand is 100-pound sword of a legendary warrior, while they have nothing but a carrying pole. They strike a blow. Seeing the man not move, they strike several more and leave. It's not that I fear them. It's because they are no match for me. I urge you not to be crude-minded. In your conduct, day and night, keep evolving higher. Even then, if you do not attain enlightenment, you will still be a highly refined individual. Be sure to be attentive. Approval. As soon as you accept and approve anything, recognizing it as your own, you are immediately bound hand and foot and cannot move. So even if there are 1,000 possibilities, nothing is right once you have recognized, accepted, and approved it is your own. It is like making a boat and outfitting it for a long journey to a land of treasures. Then as soon as you get started, you drive a stake in the ground and tie the boat down, then row with all your might. You may row till the end of time, but you will still be at the shore. You see the boat moving from side to side and think you are on the move, but actually you haven't gotten anywhere. It is also like someone turning a millstone, going round and round in circles from morning till night. What a laugh. If someone whose eyes are unclear saw you fixated on recognition and told you it was right, he'd have been seen through by someone with clear eyes. On examination, there would be quite a few loose ends. These days, quite a few just employ this path of right now, totally unable to get out of the immediate present. Nailed down in this way, they try to study Zen without getting the essential point. Once they have taken it up, they have already misunderstood. Acting as if they were in charge, they do not realize Buddhism is not understood in this way. Have you not read how Ma Gu met Zhanjing, staff in hand? Ma Gu shook the staff once and stood there serenely. Zhanjing said yes. He also met Nan Quan the same way, and Nan Quan said no. Ma Gu said, Zhanjing said yes. How can you say no? Nan Quan said, Zhanjing is right, but you are wrong. This is vulnerable to outside influences and ultimately disintegrates. Only then did Mandu see his error. If you are about to misunderstand your whole life, how can you not go to someone to find certainty? When I first went on my journey, I read verses by my teacher and immediately believed this man spoke like the ancient sages and must have genuine realization. So I studied with him for 10 years. One of those verses said, "To learn the way, first you must find out the ultimate point. Hearing sound and seeing form are inconceivable. If you discuss high and low based on words, it's just like before you were enlightened." Another verse said, "There is a road to emptiness. Everyone arrives. Those who arrive then realize the excellence of the aim. The mind ground does not grow useless plants and trees. Naturally, the body spontaneously radiates clear light." When I was young, even though I had not attained the way, in my heart I knew these were extraordinary lines. But how about hearing and seeing form? They are both conceivable. How can they be inconceivable? Then when he talked about realization, he turns around and says, "It's just like before you were enlightened." Everything before enlightenment is conceivable. How can you see a realization? This man attained non-attainment. Only when you reach the ultimate stage can you be like this. Only after 10 years did I actually understand him. Generally speaking, when you go journeying to learn the path to enlightenment, you seek. Do not sit ignorantly, but go to someone to find out the truth with certainty. When the truth is hard to realize, that is called unfinished business. Have you not heard it said that once you realize, then there's a difference? Yesterday, one had breakfast and dinner. Today, one has breakfast and dinner. Is it the same person as before? There's a difference. It's not the same. Zhao Zhu said to someone, "Have you had breakfast yet?" He said, "Yes." Zhao Zhu said, "Go wash the dishes. This is different." Do you suppose I am an ordinary man? You tell me where the difference is. Self-knowledge. I tell people to get to know the self, but seekers who hear this equate it with what beginners see and think there is nothing hard to understand about it. You should take it more slowly for a while and be more careful. What do you call the self? How about the sayings of ancient worthies on the self? Roaming the mountains, enjoying the rivers, you say. I understand. Who else is it? Another saying goes, it is yourself. You say, I understand this too. It is myself. But how about the reply, mountains, rivers, the whole earth? It is also said, when you eat, the meal is yourself. How do you understand that? You still can't get to it. The ancient worthy said, the whole earth is yourself. So how can you clear your mind? Whenever I see that people have misunderstood, I quote ancient stories to question them. For example, Jing King asked Swansha, I have just entered the school. Please point out the way in. Swansha said, do you hear the sound of the valley stream? Jing King replied, yes. Swansha said, enter from here. Jing King got the message from this. I ask you, when he heard, what did he hear? Everyone says he heard the sound of the water. But what use is such an interpretation? According to their view, the hearing clearly takes in everything at once, so there is no sound to be found apart from this hearing. Everything being a manifestation from one's own subjectivity. It is representation of active consciousness. Some answer that it was not the sound of water he heard, but his self. To this I say, how can the self hear the self? This is what is called recognizing mind, recognizing nature. Buddhism is an easily understood, energy-saving teaching. People strain themselves. Seeing them helpless, the ancients told people to try meditating quietly for a moment. These are good words, but later people did not understand the meaning of the ancients. They went off and sat like lumps with knitted brows and closed eyes, suppressing body and mind, waiting for enlightenment. How stupid! How foolish! Step back and see. An early teacher said, is it the wind ringing or is it the chimes ringing? He should have stopped right there, but he went on to vex others by saying, it is not the wind or the chimes, but only your mind ringing. What further opportunity to study do you seek? When Zen came to China, an early teacher said, it is not the wind or the flag moving, it is your minds moving. The ancient teacher gave this testimony. Why don't you understand? Just because of subject and object, that is why it is said, the objective is defined based on the subjective. Since the objective is arbitrarily defined, it produces your arbitrary subjectivity, producing difference when there was neither sameness nor difference. People nowadays talk about certain discernment. But how do you discern with certainty? It is not a matter of declaring this is a saying for beginners, that is a saying for old-timers. It's not like this at all. As a matter of fact, letting go all at once is precisely how to discern with certainty. There will be no different focus at any time. You get up in the morning, dress, wash your face, and so on. You call these miscellaneous thoughts, but all that is necessary is that there be no perceiver or perceived when you perceive, no hearer or heard when you hear, no thinker or thought when you think. Buddhism is very easy and very economical. It spares effort, but you yourself waste energy and make your own hardships. If you do not see the ease, then sit for a while and examine the principle. Since you have come here to study Zen, don't come here with imagination and figuring like you find in other places. Just step back and look. You will surely understand. However, there are those who accept attunement and those who do not. There are the foolish and the wise. There are those who can be saved and those who cannot be saved. Those who do not accept attunement insist on using fluctuating, habit-ridden consciousness and energy from food. When questioned, they make their eyes bulge, walk back and forth, hold up their regalia, accepting and approving perceptions and emotions in the dimness of their skulls and bodies. This is irremediable. Just let go, then step back and look. Only then will you understand. There are senior students of a certain type who say, I do not reason, I make no calculations, I am not attached to sound and form, I do not rely on either the impure or the pure. The sage and the ordinary mortal delusion and enlightenment are all completely empty. There are no such things in the great light. They are shrouded by the light of knowledge, attached to an extreme of knowledge. This is also irremediable. Of those two illnesses, the former is slighter than the latter. If those who have illness are willing to set it aside, step back and look, they too will naturally understand. This task spares energy to the utmost. The way of the ancients is very economical and most quintessential. Why do you waste energy? Sometimes I observe seekers come here expending a lot of energy and going to great pains. What do they want? They seek a few sayings to put in a skin bag. What relevance is there? Nevertheless, there is a genuine expedient that is very good, though only experienced seekers will be able to focus doubt on it. It is like when Xuanxia was going to give a talk on the teaching one day, but didn't speak a single word, no matter how long the assembly stood there. Finally, they began to leave in twos and threes. The Xuanxia remarked, Look, today I have really helped them, but not a single one gets it. If I start flapping my lips, though, they immediately crowd around. You come here seeking expedient techniques, seeking doctrine, seeking peace and happiness. I have no expedient techniques to give people, no doctrine, no method of peace and happiness. Why? If there is any expedient technique, it has the contrary effect of burying you and trapping you. Zhaozhou said, Just sit looking into the principle. If you do not understand in 20 or 30 years, cut off my head. This, too, was to get you to become single-minded. Have you not read how the second patriarch of Zen used to expound the teaching wherever he was, and everyone who heard him attained true mindfulness? He did not set up writing formulations, did not discuss practice and realization or cause and effect. At the time, a certain meditation teacher heard about the Zen patriarch and sent a senior disciple to spy on his lectures. When the disciple didn't come back, the meditation teacher was enraged. When they met at a major convocation, the teacher personally said to his former disciple, I expend so much effort to plant you. How could you turn your back on me this way? The former disciple replied, My vision was originally right, but was distorted by teachers. This is what Zen study is like. Later, someone asked Zhu Fing, How is it when one's vision is originally correct but distorted by teachers? Zhu Fing said, Confused encounter with the founder of Zen. The seeker asked, Where is one's own vision? Zhu Fing said, It is not gotten from a teacher. This is the way you have to be before you attain realization. Of old it was said, enlightenment is always with people, but people subjectively pursue things. In Scripture it says, if you can turn things around, they are the same as realization of suchness. But how can things be turned around? It is also said, all appearances are unreal. If you see appearances are not inherent characteristics, then you see realization of suchness. Just step back, stop mental machinations, and look closely. When suddenly you see, nothing can stop you. All the way through. No delusion, no enlightenment. Only when you have arrived at such a state are you comfortable and saving energy to the maximum degree. But this is simply being someone without delusion or enlightenment. What is there deluding you 24 hours a day? You must apply this to yourself and determine on your own. All realms of existence are there because of the deluded mind. Right now, how can they not be there? Once you realize they are not there, they cannot delude your feelings and certainly cannot do anything to you. It is necessary to attain the reality where there is no delusion and no enlightenment before you can become free and unfettered. People on the journey call this the reality under the vest. If this reality is not fully realized, it is a disaster. The patriarch Ashvaghosha explained 3 subtle and 6 coarse aspects of mentation. Stir, and there is suffering. How to not stir. Uttering a few sayings does not amount to talking of mysteries and marvels, or explaining meanings and principles. Sitting meditation and concentration do not amount to inner freedom. Think about it independently. Other people do not know what you are doing all the time. You reflect on your own. Are you in harmony with truth or not? Here you cannot be mistaken. Investigate all the way through. When my late teacher appeared in the world to teach, he said, "I rise from this jewel-flower throne and sit upon it every day with all of you. It is just that you avoid what is right before you." This is a good saying. He also remarked, "In over 10 years at one place, I cannot find a worthy opponent. Only when I went elsewhere did I actually see such a person as would live up to my sense of indignation." Good words. Few people can talk like this. I spent over 30 years journeying. You people were not even born when I found the way. If younger folk believed what I am talking about, you will step back each day, look into yourselves, and see all the way through. Comprehending everything. The Zen school is called the school of Kasyap's great absorption in quiescence. Without stirring a thread, all is understood. Without stirring a hair, all is realized. It is not just a matter of not stirring and letting it go at that. Do not rouse the mind or stir thoughts throughout the 24 hours of the day, and you should be able to comprehend everything. This is called being a member of Kasyap's school. Only then can you enter great absorption in quiescence. Now, what is there that acts as a mental object and an obstruction? Although people can investigate, people can study, they cannot understand by arousing the mind and stirring thoughts. When you encounter a situation or hear a saying, if your thoughts stir, your mind gets excited, and you make up an interpretation. In any case, you are in a scattered state. When Elder Ming has accomplished not thinking good or bad, only then did he manage to see. Thereupon he said, "Although I was in the school of the 5th patriarch of Zen, I really did not know what the Buddha meant by saying, 'Not this shore, not the further shore, not the current in between.'" Nanquan said, "It is not Buddha, it is not a thing." This is precisely what you are focusing on now. Simply study in this way. Just as a scholar has the attitude of an official once he's passed the civil service examination, you must come to the realization that you are Buddha. Only then will you be free from doubt. Each of you must take responsibility for yourself. Don't pass the time pursuing the hubbub. Seek without seeking. There is something in each of you that you will only be able to perceive when you turn round. So, how does one turn around? By non-seeking seeking. Seeking without seeking. This is precisely what people find hard to deal with and get into. How can you seek if you are not seeking? How can you not seek if you are seeking? If you only seek, how is that different from pursuing sounds and chasing forms? If you do not seek at all, how are you different from inert matter? You must seek, and yet without seeking. Not seek, yet still seek. If you can manage to penetrate this, you will then manage to harmonize seeking and non-seeking. So it is said, non-seeking, non-seeking. The body of reality is perfectly quiescent. Seeking, seeking. Responsive function does not miss. Seeking without seeking. Non-seeking, seeking. Objects and cognition merge. Substance and function are one. Therefore you find the 3 bodies, 4 knowledges, 5 eyes, and 6 spiritual powers all come to light from this. Students must be able to turn round and search all the way through in this way before they can attain realization. A seeker asked Yang Shan, "What special pathway do you have? Please point it out to me." Yang Shan said, "If I said there is anything in particular or nothing in particular, I would confuse you even more. Where are you from?" The seeker said he was from such and such a place. Yang Shan said, "Do you still think of that place?" The seeker replied, "I still think of it all the time." Yang Shan said, "What you think of are the buildings, towers, and habitations, of which there are a variety. Now think back to what thinks. Is there a variety of things there?" The seeker replied, "There is no variety of things there." Yang Shan said, "Based on your perception, you have only attained one mystery. You have a seat and are wearing clothes. Hereafter, see for yourself." This seeker said that the object of thought is varied, while the thinker is not varied. This view is biased. This is what prompted Yang Shan to say he had only attained one mystery. His perception of the path was not accurate. If you ask me, the object of thought, with a variety of buildings and houses, is in fact not various, while the unvaried thinking subject is in fact various. This can be demonstrated. Right now there is a variety before your eyes. There are not so many of these. There are similarly many types of the unvaried. When the seer, Bishmottaranerghosha, took the seeker sadhana by the hand, sadhana saw Buddhas as numerous as atoms in infinite worlds. When the seer let go of sadhana's hand, everything was as it had been before. Now how do you understand this reversion to normal on release of the hand? You'd better understand. Original reality. An ancient sage said every phenomena is the original reality. Fine, Yunman held up his cane and said, "This is not the original reality." After a pause he said, "If so, then the 3 poisons, 4 perversions, 5 clusters, 6 senses, 12 media, 18 elements, and 25 realms of being are not the original reality. Why not understand in this way? You'd save quite a bit of effort." Buddhism is a most economical affair. conserving the most energy. It has always been present, but you do not understand. I tell you, moreover, that there is nothing that is true, and there is nothing that is not true. How can there be truth and untruth in one thing? Just because of seeking unceasingly, everywhere is seeking. Pondering principles is seeking. Contemplating the model cases of the ancients is also seeking. Reading Zen books is also seeking. Even if you sit quietly, continuously from moment to moment, this too is seeking. Do you want to understand? Then that seeking of yours is actually not seeking. This is extremely difficult to believe and to penetrate, hard to work on. Those of you who are not comfortable are that way, generally speaking, because you are either oblivious or excited. That is why you say you do not understand. Right now, how can you avoid being oblivious or excited? When that very thought of yours arises, it is the flowing whirl of birth and death. Do you consider it habit-activated consciousness, or do you consider it immutable? Contemplate in this way over and over again, and you will have a bit of guiding principle. Same reality, different dreams. People may sleep on the same bed, under the same covers, yet their individual dreams are not the same. An ancient sage said, "We share the same one reality, yet do not realize it." For example, within a single reality of life and death, there are those who can enter into life and death without being bound by life and death. There are those who are bound by life and death in the midst of life and death. In the midst of the same common reality, one person is bound while the other is free. Is this not the individual difference in the dreams? You usually make birth and death into one extreme, and absence of birth and death into another extreme. You make thinking into one extreme and non-thinking into another extreme. You make speech into one extreme and non-speech into another extreme. Here I have neither the business of Zen monks nor anything transcendental. I just talk about getting out of birth and death. This is not a matter of simply saying this and letting the matter rest at that. You must see that which has no birth or death right in the midst of birth and death. The great master Yongjia visited the sixth patriarch of Zen and said, "The matter of birth and death is serious. Transitoriness is swift." The sixth patriarch said, "Why not comprehend the birthless and realize what has no speed?" Yongjia said, "Comprehension itself is birthless. Realization of the fundamental has no speed." When Kaoshan took leave of Dongshan, Dongshan asked, "Where are you going?" Kaoshan replied, "To an unchanging place." Dongshan retorted, "If it is an unchanging place, how could there be any going?" Kaoshan replied, "The going is also unchanging." Were these not realized people? You make thought one extreme and non-thinking another extreme. You make the unspoken outside of the spoken. Even if you understand the unspoken clearly, as soon as words are spoken, they block you. Why not study Zen in this way? Walk, stand, sit, and recline all day long without ever walking, standing, sitting, or reclining. Sometimes seekers come here, utter a phrase, and clap their hands. How does this amount to an understanding beyond dualistic extremes? You should think in this way. Clearly I am in the midst of birth and death. How can I get free of birth and death? Don't say this itself is it, that you basically have no birth and death. It is not realized by your uttering this statement. There are those who hear someone say there is no birth and death and immediately say, right, there is originally no birth or death. If you make your interpretation in this way, it will be impossible to understand. Since it does not admit of rationalization and contrived understanding, and does not admit of being explained away, how can you work on it? An ancient said, "I only use what you bring me to point out an entryway to you." Take care. Watch yourself. As I see members of present-day Zen communities, it is as if none of them are talking about this reality. Now, wherever you go, there are Zen communities and teachers preaching Zen and Tao, holding interviews and lectures, all talking about this matter. Why do I say they haven't been talking about it at all? They are talking, to be sure, but they cannot actually speak of it. Not only can they not speak of it, they are unable to see it. Not knowing how to work on it as it is, they simply say, when the true imperative is brought up in its entirety, the 10 directions are cut off. Any Buddha that shows up will get a beating, and any demon that shows up will get a beating. They fanatically talk Zen, but never touch upon what is most urgent. What I talk here is something that others neglect. I casually pick it up from the trash heap and ask people about it, but they cannot say anything. Right now, when people who have already entered the room inquire into the way and attained understanding see the incense stand, is it an incense stand or not? If they say it is an incense stand, this is the same as ordinary people. If it is not an incense stand, to whom was the incense stand given away? Lightly question them and they go to pieces. This is because they have always been working in idleness. Now let me ask you a question. Never mind about since you've been here. Before you went journeying, before you entered this community, when you saw an incense stand, what did you call it? You called it an incense stand. Everyone calls it an incense stand. Why do you not think why you call it an incense stand? Zen should be studied in this way. You must understand what has been in you since beginningless time. Master Xu Shan said, if you don't see the original reality, obstacles will follow you all along. If people have obstacles, they go wrong countless thousands of times. My teacher said, suppose a bit of filth is stuck to the tip of the nose of a sleeping man totally unknown to him. When he wakes up, he notices a foul smell, sniffing his shirt. He thinks his shirt stinks, so he takes it off. But then, whatever he picks up stinks. He doesn't realize the odor is on his nose. If someone who knows tells him it has nothing to do with the things themselves, he stubbornly refuses to believe it. The knowing one tells him to simply wipe his nose with his hand, but he won't. If he were willing to wipe his nose, only then could he know he was already getting somewhere. Finally, he would wash it off with water, and there would be no foul odor at all. Whatever he smelled, that foul odor wouldn't be there from the start. Studying Zen is also like this. Those who will not stop and watch themselves on their own instead pursue intellectual interpretations. But that pursuit of intellectual interpretations, seeking rationales and making comparative judgments, is all completely off. If you would turn your attention around and watch yourself, you would understand everything. As it is said, when one faculty returns to the source, the 6 functions are all in abeyance. Just see in this way, and you will have some enlightened understanding. Understand immediately. Ha ha ha! You still don't understand on your own. I tell you this. If you still don't understand on your own, then how will you understand if you go somewhere else? At other places, they either put you through changes or abruptly fixate you. Here I neither put you through the changes nor abruptly fixate you. This saves energy and is easy to comprehend. So why don't you understand? Because of your millions of rationalizations. These make it hard for you to understand. Buddhahood is an easily comprehended state, comfortable and pleasant. But even though it is easily understood, nevertheless it is hard to enter into and hard to work on. At other places, if they abruptly fixate you, then you have something to work on. If they put you through changes, then you have something to chew on. People come here and declare that they do not dare to say they are right. So why don't you dare say you are right? Then how should you be? Why not look at it this way? I'm just afraid you will misunderstand here and get the wrong idea. I just want to have you understand immediately without stirring a single thought. Then again, there are those who say, according to my view, everything is all right. They are all scorched sprouts, like rotten seeds which will never grow. When you have declared you are right, then how could you be helped out any more? This is why it is said that ordinary people may still evolve. There are also those who, having understood, still cannot express it in speech. Even if they talk of it, they do not make any sense. Don't be careless and crude. Examine carefully. I am a fellow seeker with you. If I comprehend, you must comprehend too. If you don't comprehend, I don't comprehend either. Have you not read how Swancha pointed to a white spot on the ground in front of him and asked the student, "See?" The student said, "Yes." Swancha said, "I see, and so do you. Why don't you understand?" One of my fellow students, one Elder Lee, saw my late teacher for a year and a half. Every time he went in for a personal interview, the teacher would just say to him, "Elder, have you distinguished black and white at all?" Every time he went, this is what happened. How do you interpret talk like this? How do you work? Nowadays, there are no adepts like this helping people. There are no elders who seek like this either. Anyone else would have gotten upset. One day he heard the teacher say in the lecture, "Going in and out the same door. Hereditary enemies." And suddenly his previous understanding turned out to be like flowers in the sky, and he now saw the truth. You should work in this way and realize enlightenment in this way. Zen should be studied this way. As none of you have had an awakening, you should look straight into your vital spirit. If no one told you and no one instructed you, it would be hard to work. Now that you have met someone, you should work. You must distinguish black and white before you can do it. Instant enlightenment. Those who are now on the journey should believe that there is such a thing as instant enlightenment. In other places, they also should say that there is such a thing as instant enlightenment. If they have no instant enlightenment, how can they be called Zen communities? It's just because what they have inherited and transmit is only the practice of looking at the model cases of the ancients. They may contemplate one or two examples and get a rough bit of knowledge, a bit of interpretation. If there is any point they cannot understand, they seek a gap to bore into, seeking understanding. Once they have understood, they say the matter is only like this, and then they immediately go on to circulate it in Zen communities. None of them have ever spoken of what instant enlightenment is. If there is no such thing as instant enlightenment, how can you free your mind of the 25 states of being in the 3 realms? How can you free your mind of the sensation of uncertainty? Now, there have already been professional priests coming here saying, perception is unobscured, totally accepting perception and claiming that is right. That means they do not see what is not obscured. When I ask them about other worlds, they do not know. When I question them about the senses and objects, it turns out that they have not broken through. How can they imagine that the feelings and perceptions of ordinary people are exactly the same as instant enlightenment? Today, I say to everyone, just trust that there is such a thing as instant enlightenment. It is like a farmer finding an alchemical pill as he plows the field. After taking it, the whole family goes to heaven. It is also like a commoner being appointed prime minister. In the teachings, it says that those ordinary feelings and perceptions of yours are like unbaked clay, which is useless before it has been fired. You have to bake it in a hot fire before it is useful. This is like an instant enlightenment. When I came out of Sichuan, I only called on one person. I know this person's talk was the same as the ancients. I once asked my teacher, "I've heard it said that there is enlightenment in Zen. Is that so?" My teacher said, "If there were no enlightenment, how could it be attained? Just investigate in an easygoing way." So I studied in a relaxed frame of mind. There was a certain elder, Fu, whose insight was so luminously clear that I used to go to him with questions. But he just used to tell me, "You must make a living on your own. Don't come questioning me." One day he recited a story to me. Zhao Shu showed some fire to a student and said, "Don't call it fire. What is it?" I wondered deeply at this. Obviously it is fire. Why not call it fire? I contemplated this for 3 years, always reflecting, how dare I use the feelings and perceptions of an ordinary man to ask about the realization of sages? I have also heard what it says in the Lotus Scripture. This truth cannot be understood by the discriminations of discursive thought, and have always kept this in mind. Today, when you say you are right, just as you are, that is because you have produced an interpretive understanding, and so do not understand. Once my teacher went to the residence of Judge Li, who invited him into the library. After lighting some incense, the judge picked up a copy of Transmission of the Lamp and said to the teacher, "Although I am a man of the world, I have always taken an interest in this path. Whenever I read this book, I find many points I do not understand." My teacher said, "This matter is not understood in that way. You need to have realization of enlightenment first. If you have enlightenment, you naturally need not ask another about whatever you do not understand. If you have no enlightenment, even what understanding you do have is not yet right either." The judge remarked, "My teacher, you have spoken rightly." As for me, since I was the superintendent of guests, I attained understanding at the fireside. After that, there was nothing I did not understand. You must see the reality of instant enlightenment yourself before you can attain it. No one in the Zen communes of the present time tells of it. Zen Mastery. There is nothing in my experience that is not true. If there were anything at all untrue, how could I presume to tell others? How could I presume to guide others? When I affirm my truth, there is no affirming mind and no affirming objects. That is why I dare tell people. As for you, obviously there is something not true. That is why you have come to someone to find certainty. If you had found truth already, then when would you go off questioning another? However, here I just point out where you're right. If you're not right, I'll never tell you that you are. When you are right and true, then I'll agree with you. Only bet on what's right and true. I see through everyone. If I've seen people, I know whether or not they have any enlightenment or any understanding, just as an expert physician recognizes ailments at a glance, discerning the nature of the illness and whether or not it can be remedied. One who knows all this only after a detailed inquiry into symptoms is a mediocre physician. This is like a story I have quoted on another occasion. Foyan pointed to a hanging screen, whereupon two students went and rolled it up. Foyan said, "One gain, one loss." People like you in your state must say, "What gain or loss is there?" Some say, "One went to roll up the screen with understanding, this is gain. One went to roll up the screen without understanding, this is loss." If this were so, how could a remedy be possible? Now, if you have not managed to understand clearly, it is because your enlightenment is not true. Like someone ignorant of medicine claiming to be a doctor, you cannot discern when people understand. You cannot tell when they do not understand. You cannot discern at all whether or not they have any insight. Then how can you help people? How can you teach people? You must examine reality through and through before you can. If you are willing to examine reality through and through, you will not fail to understand. Have you not read how an ancient said, "Just sit there investigating the truth for 20 or 30 years. If you do not attain understanding, cut off my head and make a piss pail out of it." Seekers sometimes say this is right, but when it comes to investigating reality through and through, they change unstably. It is like watching a horse ridden past a window. In a flash, it is gone. One must be like 30 tons of iron, which cannot be pulled forward or pushed back. Only then do you know it's the real thing. People like you stir the minute you're shaken by someone. One more push, and you tumble. You should be so perfectly clear that you see your 360 joints and 84,000 pores open up all at once. Inside your body and outside in the physical world, every phenomenon is the original reality. Nothing is not it. Only then will you get it. But professional priests nowadays can only speak after dawdling. If I proceed all at once, they have nothing to cling to and think that they have wasted their time. You people had better not waste this time. Since you are already involved, stabilize and awaken your vital spirit in an effort to find out the truth. Clear eyes. People with clear eyes do not settle complacently into fixed ways. The reason you haven't attained this in everyday life is simply that your eyes are not clear. If your eyes were clear, you'd have attained it. That is why it is said that people with clear eyes are hard to find. As soon as you say this is thus and so, that is a complacent fixation. People with clear eyes are not like this. Have you not read how Dishan said to the assembly, "Tonight I will not answer questions. Anyone who asks a question gets a thrashing"? How could anyone without clear eyes comprehend this? Fail in the slightest to comprehend this, and you fall into conceptual thought which constructs signals. That is why Dishan's normal experience of life was comprehended by only one person, Yantu. Therefore I say, you have to have clear eyes before you can attain this. Finding certainty. The original Zen masters are real true friends. Ha, ha, ha. One can only say this much. If you understand, you can have the experience yourself. Then you will have something to act on. If you get involved in rationalizations, comparisons, and verbalizations, then you do not understand, and you cannot experience it yourself. When you are going about and doing your chores, do you see that the original Zen masters are real true friends? Since you don't see, when asked about it, you get flustered. What is the problem? The problem lies in the fact that you are always coming from the midst of conceptual comparisons, and do not personally attain experience. All of you go sit on benches, close your eyes, and demolish your thinking all the way from the Milky Way above to Hades below before you can make a statement or two. But when you get to a quiet place, you still don't get the ultimate point. Before your eyes there is nothing but things that obstruct people. Lightly questioned, you cannot reach the aim. Right now, let's base the discussion on realities. We mustn't talk at random. For a moment, let me ask you this. When you haven't eaten anything at all for 3 days, can you be active? Certainly you cannot be active. Only after eating something can you be active. If so, it is all food energy. But when you get here, if you want to find suitable people, first it is necessary to see that which is not food energy. Zen should be studied in this way. This alone is called finding certainty. Once you have eaten, that should sustain you as you take this matter up and look into it. But you are totally ignorant of this matter. Instead, you try to apply it in idleness, discussing right and wrong, focusing on useless things, either thinking about them or trying to demolish them. What a pity. It's all misapplication. You do not realize that as soon as you aim your mind, you're already a generation too late. In an instant, you have flowed into ideation, which forms the root of birth and death. Furthermore, if you don't know even while physically alive, where will you seek after your material body dissolves? In recent days, there are those who just sit here as they are. At first they are alert, but after a while they doze. 9 out of 10 sit there dozing. How miserable. If you do not know how to do the inner work, how can you expect to understand by sitting rigidly? This is not the way it is. How can you see? When Dansha held up a whisk, Layman Pang held up a hammer. When Dansha tossed the whisk down, Layman Pang put down the hammer. The next day, Layman Pang said, "How do you interpret yesterday's case?" Dansha relaxed and reclined. Layman Pang left. Are those not real knowers? How could this admit of your arbitrary explanations, or permit you to add explanatory footnotes? Also, Yantu said, "Those who cultivate purification must let it come forth from their own hearts in each individual situation covering the entire universe." How can this be quiet sitting and meditating? My teacher said, when you sleep, study Zen in your sleep. At meals, study Zen as you eat. An ancient also said, when you sit, there is the logic of when you sit. When you stand, there is the logic of when you stand. You people have not attained the experience, so you miss quite a few good things in the course of a day. That is why I say the original Zen masters are real true friends. The path of the original Zen masters is like the bright sun in the blue sky. Why are there people losing the way? Get an understanding. When you cannot understand, where is your mistake? You do not understand at all, fundamentally not understanding. You then seek understanding. An ancient said, don't abandon this world and cling to the beyond, for if you do so, it will be even harder to understand. I told you that you fundamentally do not understand. Why not look at it as when Foyan was journeying and Dizang asked him where he was going? When Foyan replied that he was journeying, Dizang asked, and do you understand what the journey is for? Foyan answered no. Dizang said, if you want to know what the journey is for, the one who does not understand is it. Foyan realized enlightenment from this. I ask you, since he did not understand, then how did he attain? You must find a way to penetrate before you will know. This is not a matter of forced understanding, of all sorts of contrived understanding. Since you basically do not understand, what are you capable of doing? You need to examine attentively. look to see where the not understanding comes from. Do you want to know? This non-understanding of yours comes from nowhere. And since it comes from nowhere, how could this not understanding be? And when you understand, the non-understanding goes nowhere. When you look at it this way, you may be sure of attaining clarification. As long as you do not know how to be people in the midst of enlightened realities, you only exercise your minds in the mundane world. If you have never taken a moment to look into this matter, how could you actually understand right away? When someone asks you a question, you talk randomly, but this is not a matter that can be handled in this way. In the old days, I once heard that Master Jiang Lin saw a seeker coming and said, "I do not deny that you can talk about it, but by the time you've gone 2 or 3 steps down the stairs, you're already no longer thus. Better not talk wildly." See how the ancients examine from the roots how people are to go about things. In Buddhism, no waste is reasonable. Get an understanding of it. Principle and Phenomena. Grandmaster Yunmen said, "If you really have not yet attained, for now follow principle to gain discernment." Zen students should also proceed in accord with principle, not being so presumptuous as to hope for something transcendental. In general, students nowadays make phenomena into an extreme and principle into another extreme. This causes them to be physically and mentally uneasy. Why not have phenomena always conform to principle? Without ever talking about the phenomena of beginningless time, just consider the instant of conception, when there is a sudden change of the physical body and the material world. From that point on, all is phenomena. Every diverse element in the conditional body is a phenomenon. Right now, how can you clear your mind of the phenomena so as to conform to principle? Phenomena have discrete forms, while principle is formless. Once the ancients realized the principle, they adapted to phenomena in accord with principle. Have you not read how someone once clapped his hands and laughed on hearing a signal sound, saying, "I understand, I understand"? Is this not following principle to learn? Why not observe in this way 24 hours a day, doing inner work like this? Eventually it will ripen, and you will naturally harmonize with the principle. One of the original Zen masters said, "If you want to attain harmonization quickly, just speak of non-duality." It is not a matter of just saying it and thereupon understanding. You must actually attain harmonization before you can realize this. Guishan said, "Phenomena and principle are not two. The real Buddha is suchness as is." I have seen many who cannot follow principle. When they take it up, they turn it upside down at once. They make useless theoretical interpretations of the sayings and model cases of the ancients. Their different challenges, records of seasonal addresses, and the modalities of their individual schools, considering this to be Zen study. How miserable. Study of the path is not like this. People of the later generations are even more ignorant. Spending 10 or 15 years on vain conceit, they attain nothing at all. You have unconsciously acquired habits of thinking about yourself and others, and hardly ever give a thought to the matter of independence. How will you be in the future? Don't keep standing there. Each of you find out on your own. Keys of Zen mind. You should not set up limitations in the boundless void. But if you set up limitlessness as the boundless void, you encompass your own downfall. Therefore, those who understand voidness have no concept of voidness. If people use words to describe mind, they never apprehend mind. If people do not describe mind in words, they still do not apprehend mind. Speech is fundamentally mind. You do not apprehend it because of describing it. Speechlessness is fundamentally mind. You do not apprehend it because of not describing it. Whatever sorts of understanding you use to approximate it, none tally with your own mind itself. A high master said, "It is only tacit harmony. Because it is like this, if you haven't attained the path yet, just do not entertain any false thoughts." If people recognize false thoughts and deliberately try to stop them, it's because you see there are false thoughts. If you know you're having false thoughts and deliberately practice contemplation to effect perception of truth, this is also seeing that there are false thoughts. If you know that falsehood is fundamentally the path, then there is no falsehood in it. Therefore, those who master the path have no attainment. If the path were sought by deliberate intention, the path would be something attained. Just do not seek elsewhere, and realize there is no confusion or falsehood. This is called seeing the path. In recent times, everyone says, nothing is not the path. They are like people sitting by a food basket talking about eating. They can never be filled, because they do not themselves partake. Realization obliterates the subject-object split. It's not that there's some mysterious principle besides. In your daily activities, when you see forms, this is an instance of realization. When you hear sounds, this is an instance of realization. When you eat and drink, this is an instance of realization. Each particular is without subject or object. This is not a matter of long-time practice. It does not depend on cultivation. That is because it is something that is already there. Worldly people do not recognize it, call it roaming aimlessly. That is why it is said, only by experiential realization do you know it is unfathomable. People who study the path clearly know there is such a thing. Why do they fail to get the message and go on doubting? It is because their faith is not complete enough and their doubt is not deep enough. Only with depth and completeness, be it faith or doubt, is it really Zen. If you are incapable of introspection like this, you will eventually get lost in confusion and lose the thread, wearing out and stumbling halfway along the road. But if you can look into yourself, there is no one else. Once we say, this matter, how can we know it any more than that? Knowledge may be arbitrary thought, but this matter itself isn't lost. The path is not revealed only after explanation and direction. It is inherently always out in the open. Explanation and direction are expedient methods used to get you to realize enlightenment. They are also temporary byroads. Some attain realization through explanation, some enter through direction, some attain by spontaneous awakening. Ultimately, there is nothing different, no separate attainment. It is simply a matter of reaching the source of mind. People say that to practice cultivation only after realizing enlightenment is in the province of curative methodology, but Zen also admits of using true knowledge and vision as a curative. In terms of a particular individual, however, this may not be necessary. The path of Buddhahood is eternal. Only after long endurance of hard work can it be realized. It is continuous throughout past, present, and future. The ordinary and the holy are one suchness. This is why it is said that the path of Buddhahood is eternal. If you do not produce differing views, you never leave it. This is the point of long endurance, of hard work. Ultimately, there is no separate reality. Thus it is said that it can then be realized. This is a matter for strong people. People who do not discern what is being asked give replies depending on what comes up. They do not know it is something you ask yourself. To whom would you answer? When people do not understand an answer, they produce views based on words. They do not know it is something you answer for yourself. What truth have you found? And where does it lead? Therefore it is said, it's all you. Look. Look. Some people say, the verbal teachings given out by the enlightened ones since ancient times circulate throughout the world, each distinctly clear. Why is all this oneself? That is profound ingratitude toward the kindness of the ancient sages. I now reply that I am actually following the source message of the enlightened ones. You yourselves turn your backs on it, not I. If you say they have some doctrine, you are thereby slandering the enlightened. Do not be someone who finally cuts off the seed of enlightenment. If you do not discern the ultimate within yourself, whatever you do will be artificial. No matter how much you memorize or how many words you understand, it will be of no benefit to you. Thus it is said, you want to listen attentively to Buddha? Why doesn't Buddha listen to himself? If you seek a formal Buddha outside the listening, it will not resemble you. An adept said, for me to make a statement in reply to you is not particularly hard. Now, if you could gain understanding at a single saying, that would amount to something. If you do not understand, then I have gone wrong. Students nowadays all consider questions and answers to be essential to Zen, not realizing that this is a grasping and rejecting conceptual attitude. Terms such as study in reference to principle and in reference to phenomena are recently coined expressions. Even if you have a little perception, you still shouldn't stop. Haven't you heard it said that the path of nirvana aims at absolute liberation? You have to be able to monitor yourself. When people proceed on the path because they are confused and do not know their own minds, they come to mountain forests to see teachers, imagining that there is a special way that can make people comfortable, not realizing that the best exercise is to look back and study your previous confusion. If you do not get this far, even to go into the mountain forests forever will be a useless act. Confusion is extremely accessible, yet hard to penetrate. That is why ancient worthies said, it is hard to believe, hard to understand. This is an explanation of the path characteristic of the instant school. Looking back into what has been going on is already an expression of change. But what about if you do not do so?
Later generations eventually took this statement to refer to plain ordinariness, but this is just failure of understanding and absorption on the part of later students.
Since time immemorial, there have been two kinds of method. There is true method, which is what is called the exposition that has no interruption. Then there is expedient method, which is what is referred to as subtle response to all potentials. If you gain entry by way of true method, you understand spiritually in a natural and spontaneous manner, without needing to make use of contemplation, never to regress with countless wondrous capacities. If you gain entry by way of expedient method, you must take the seat, wear the clothing, and hereafter see for yourself before you can attain. This cannot yet be considered ultimate. These two kinds of method are one reality, and cannot be lost for an instant. Students should think about this. Zhu Fing said to people, "Don't have me make a statement that refers to you. If there is a statement that refers to you, what use is it? It is simply that the ancient had no choice and could not avoid speaking in these terms. Later, people who did not understand the ancients' intention thought it means that there is nothing to say about oneself. Thus, they misunderstood. People nowadays mostly take the immediate mirroring awareness to be the ultimate principle. That is why Zhuangzi said to people, "Tell me, does it still exist in remote, uninhabited places, deep in the mountains?" Enlightenment of mind and seeing its essence should be like Zhufeng and Zhuangzi. Genuine application to reality should be like Nanquan and Zhaozhou. Students nowadays just take the methods of the ancients to be the way of Zen. They are unable to study from the same source as the ancients themselves did. It is like a strong man carrying a heavy load over a log bridge without losing his balance. What supports him like this? Just single-minded attention. Working on the path is also like this. As it says in Scripture, a lion has all of its power, whether it is catching an elephant or a rabbit. If you ask what power we should have all of, it is the power of non-deception. If you see anything in the slightest different from mind, you forfeit your own life. Thus, for those who attain the path, there is nothing that is not it. The power is very great. It is only that the function of power is made deficient by infections of unlimited misapperception. Without all these different states, different conditions, different entanglements, and different thoughts, you can transform freely, however you wish, without any obstacle. You shouldn't strain to seek the path. If you seek it, you will lose the path. You need not strain to make things fluid. If you try to make them fluid, things remain as they are. If you neither seek nor try to produce fluidity, the path will merge with things. Then what thing is not the path? Suppose a man with clear eyes goes into a jewel mine but does not know how to go about it. In other words, suppose he thinks he can go in without a torch to light the way. Then when he bumps his head and hurts himself, he thinks it to be a dangerous cave, not a jewel mine. An intelligent person going in there would take a lamp to light up the mine to view. Then all kinds of jewels would be selected at will and taken out. Similarly, you should be using the light of insight and wisdom 24 hours a day, not letting the 6 fields of sense objects hurt you. In the old days, Assembly Leader Yong took leave of Fenyang, along with Ximing, but Yong had not yet completely realized the marvel. Though he had followed Ximing for 20 years, after all he was not free and untrammeled. One night they sat around the brazier until very late. Ximing picked up the fire tongs, hit the embers, and said, "Assembly Leader Yong, Assembly Leader Yong." Yong clucked his tongue and said with disapproval, "Foxy devil." Ximing pointed at Yong and said, "This tired old guy still goes on like this." In this way, Yong finally realized the ultimate end. Nevertheless, he continued to follow Ximing to the end of his life. Whenever Ximing would pose complex, stimulating questions that the students could not answer, Yong alone hit the mark, and Ximing would nod approval. This is called medicine without disease. Few of those who study it attain the essential. Needless to say, mere intellectuals of later times have no way of comprehending this matter. Your attainment of it should be like Yong. Your activation of the medicine should be like Ximing. Then, hopefully, you will be all right. When you find peace and quiet in the midst of busyness and clamor, the towns and cities become mountain forests. Afflictions are enlightenment. Sentient beings realize true awakening. These sayings can be uttered and understood by all beginners. who construe it as uniform equanimity. But then, when they let their minds go, the ordinary and the spiritual are divided as before. Quietude and activity operate separately. So obviously this was only an intellectual understanding. You have to actually experience stable peacefulness before you can attain oneness. You cannot force understanding. In recent generations, many have come to regard question-and-answer dialogues as the style of the Zen school. They do not understand what the ancients were all about. They only pursue trivia and do not come back to the essential. How strange. How strange. People in olden times asked questions on account of confusion, so they were seeking actual realization through their questioning. When they got a single saying or half a phrase, they would take it seriously and examine it until they penetrated it. They were not like people nowadays who pose questions at random and answer with whatever comes out of their mouths, making laughingstocks of themselves. People who attain study the path 24 hours a day, never abandoning it for a moment. Even if these people do not gain access to it, every moment of thought is already cultivating practical application. Usually it is said that cultivated practice does not go beyond purification of mind, speech, action, and the six senses. But the Zen way is not necessarily like this. Why? Because Zen concentration is equal to transcendent insight in every moment of thought. Wherever you are, there are naturally no ills. Eventually one day the ground of mind becomes thoroughly clear, and you attain complete fulfillment. This is called absorption in one practice. Nowadays people only work on concentration power and do not open the eye of insight. For them, stories and sayings just become argumentation, unstable mental activity. Zen study is not a small matter. You do not yet need to transcend the Buddhas and surpass the adepts, but once you have attained it, it will not be hard to transcend and surpass them if you wish. Sitting meditation. The light of mind is reflected in emptiness. Its substance is void of relative or absolute. Golden waves all around. Zen is constant in action or stillness. Thoughts arise, thoughts disappear. Don't try to shut them off. Let them flow spontaneously. What has ever arisen and vanished? When arising and vanishing quiet down, there appears the great Zen master, sitting, reclining, walking around. There's never an interruption. When meditating, why not sit? When sitting, why not meditate? Only when you have understood this way is it called sitting meditation. Who is it that sits? What is meditation? To try to seat it is using Buddha to look for Buddha. Buddha need not be sought. Seeking takes you further away. In sitting, you do not look at yourself. Meditation is not an external art. At first, the mind is noisy and unruly. There is still no choice but to shift it back. That is why there are many methods. To teach in quiet observation. When you sit up and gather your spirit, at first it scatters helter-skelter. Over a period of time, eventually it calms down, opening and freeing the six senses. When the six senses rest a bit, discrimination occurs therein. As soon as discrimination occurs, it seems to produce arising and vanishing. The transformation of arising and vanishing come from manifestations of one's own mind. Put your own mind to use to look back once. Once you've returned, no need to do it again. You wear a halo of light on your head. the spiritual flames leap and shine, unobstructed in any state of mind, all-inclusive, all-pervasive. Birth and death forever cease. A single grain of restorative elixir turns gold into liquid. Acquired pollution of body and mind have no way to get through. Confusion and enlightenment are temporarily explained. Stop discussing opposition and accord. When I think carefully of olden days, when I sit coolly seeking, though it's nothing different, it was quite a mess. You can turn from ordinary mortal to sage in an instant, but no one believes. All over the earth is unclarity. Best be very careful. If it happens you do not know, then sit up straight and think. One day you'll bump into it. This I humbly hope.
What you have just heard are translations of general lectures on Zen by Foyan, who is universally recognized as one of the greatest masters of the Song Dynasty Zen revival. Going back to the original and classical Zen masters, Foyan presents many simple exercises in attention and thought designed to lead to the awakening of Zen insight into the real nature of the self. After the passing of the classical masters, very few Zen teachers equaled Foyan in the degree to which he fostered independence and autonomy and freedom in his hearers from the very outset. He was completely free of any desire for fame and followers, and made no attempt to recruit disciples. All he wanted was for people to open their own eyes, stand on their own 2 feet, to see directly without delusion, and act on truth without confusion. As the practical relevance of ancient wisdom to modern problems becomes increasingly apparent, there is an ever greater need to retrieve these essential insights from ages of cultural overlay, embellishment, and historical decline. Whether we are simply interested in developing the cosmopolitan outlook proper to citizens of the world, or whether we are also interested in higher philosophy and free thought, today it is no longer plausible to regard world wisdom traditions as the domain of esoteric cultists and fringe intellectuals. The effort to extract useful knowledge and pragmatic procedures from ancient lore is a hallmark of the original science of mind, known as Zen. While many sects and cults eventually grew up around the traces of original Zen, as a rule these spin-offs returned to the very same sort of sentimental religiosity and dogmatic authoritarianism that original Zen eschewed, making them useless, even counterproductive, in the way of Zen mind liberation. The essence of original Zen is self-understanding and self-realization. In classical Zen terminology, this development is called attainment of maximum potential and maximum function. This is envisioned as a kind of liberation, a kind of awakening, which the many techniques of Zen mind art are designed to provoke and develop. The Zen understanding of the human condition is that we habitually get ourselves into all sorts of binds on account of our vulnerability to the influences of external and internal changes. The crux of the problem seems to be a lack of fluidity, a sort of rigidity in the way we view the world and think about it. In the famous Zen simile, we are like someone in a boat who thinks the bank of the river is moving. Closer observation reveals it is the boat that is moving, resulting in a changing perspective. Similarly, through Zen understanding, we can observe the changes in our bodies and minds that cause our view of the world and feelings for other people to fluctuate from time to time, altering our reactions and behavior. In this way, we can gain an extra perspective on ourselves and our lives, a more objective point of view, less distorted by unexamined biases and undetected inner currents, and thus master our own potential. What is the true self that Zen seeks to understand and to realize? To say it is like something, replied one ancient master, would be to miss the mark.
A description, after all, is not the self itself. Zen seeks direct knowledge that must be experienced oneself. The use of Zen theory and concentration formulas is to arouse this latent faculty while making it possible to monitor its performance both rationally and intuitively. Many famous Zen sayings illustrate the seeming paradox of the self, so near at hand and yet so subtle and inscrutable to the self itself. Though it has long been in use, when questioned, no one knows what it is. What is this? Everyone uses it every day without being aware of it. How to become aware of it, and how to use this awareness as a foundation for mastering its use, is the task of Zen realization. It could be said that the object of Zen, therefore, is to awaken the self and to develop it to a degree of maturity that is not dictated merely by physical or social needs. This involves inward discovery and empowerment of an autonomous core of subtly conscious, intelligent awareness which oversees and harmonizes the instinctual, emotional, social, and intellectual facets of one's being. In Zen terminology, this faculty is sometimes referred to as the director, by way of allusion to the function of the mature self. Referred to in Zen lore as the work, the development of the director is summed up with characteristic precision and beauty in a Buddhist scripture often quoted in Zen literature. It is better to master the mind than be mastered by mind. Thus, self-knowledge is an aim, but it is also a means. Self-knowledge is a means of deeper self-understanding and ultimately of self-realization. In other words, self-knowledge in the Zen process is not pursued by means of theoretical study, but by means of itself. How this is accomplished is the content of Zen study. When this is done, everything turns into Zen learning. There are many statements in Zen technical literature designed to orient the learner toward understanding, then experiencing the real self, or the self apart from socially conditioned views. From which vantage point one then understands the real world through the real self. "You do not need to seek," said one of the great masters, "but you must save yourself. No one can do it for you." The original Zen teachings fostered the utmost in supreme independence and supreme responsibility for oneself. In order to overcome the potential of self-deception inherent in this posture, Zen masters insisted on experiential insight into the most fundamental nature of being itself. This was called seeing nature, or seeing essence. Seeing essence is also called gaining entry, signifying the initiatory nature of this experience. Zen teachings and practices do not deal only with the process of awakening insight into essence, but also with the aftermath of awakening, the process of maturing and applying Zen consciousness. Song of Trusting the Heart, Sing-Kan, the third patriarch of Zen. The ultimate way is without difficulty. It's only averse to discrimination. Just do not hate or love, and it will be thoroughly clear. A hair's breadth miss is as the distance between sky and earth. If you want to have it appear before you, don't keep conforming and opposing. Opposition and conformity struggling becomes a sickness in the mind. If you don't know the hidden truth, you work in vain at quieting thought. It is complete as space itself, without lack or excess. It is indeed because of grasping and rejecting that you are therefore not thus. Do not pursue existing objects. Do not dwell in forbearance of voidness. In the uniformly equanimous heart, these quietly disappear of themselves. Stop movement to return to stillness, and stopping makes even more movement. As long as you remain in dual extremes, How can you know they're of one kind? If you don't know they're of one kind, you will lose efficacy in both realms. Trying to get rid of existence is obscuring being. Trying to follow emptiness is turning away from emptiness. Much talk and much cogitation estranges you from it even more. Stop talking and cogitating, and you will penetrate everywhere. Return to the root, and you will get the essence. Follow perceptions, and you lose the source. The instant you turn awareness around, you transcend the emptiness before the eon. Changes in the emptiness before us all come from arbitrary views. It is not necessary to seek reality. All that is needed is ending the views. Dualistic views do not abide. Be careful not to pursue them. As soon as there is affirmation and denial, you lose your mind in confusion. Two exist because of one. Do not even keep the one. When the one mind is unborn, myriad things have no fault. No fault, no things, unborn, unminding. When the subject disappears from objects, objects submerge along with the subject. Objects are objects because of the subject. The subject is the subject because of objects. If you want to know them both, they are basically one void. One voidness, the same in both, equally contains myriad images. If you do not see fine and coarse, how could there be preference? The great way is broad, without ease or difficulty. Small views and foxy doubts slow you up the more you hurry. If you cling to it, you lose measure and will inevitably enter a false path. Let it be as it naturally is. Its substance neither goes nor stays. Let your nature merge with the way, and you will roam free of vexation. Tying down the thoughts goes against the real. Oblivion is not good. It is not good to belabor the spirit. Why estrange the familiar? If you want to gain the way of oneness, don't be adverse to the 6 sense fields. The 6 sense fields are not bad. After all, they're the same as true awakening. The wise do not contrive. Fools bind themselves. Things are not different in themselves. You arbitrarily get attached yourself. If you take the mind to use the mind, is this not a big mistake? When deluded, you create peace and chaos. When enlightened, there is no good or bad. All dualistic extremes come from subjective considerations. Dreams, illusions, flowers in the air, why bother to grasp them? Gain, loss, right, wrong, let them go all at once. If the eyes do not sleep, dreams disappear of themselves. If the mind does not differ, all things are one suchness. One suchness embodies the mystery, utterly still and unconditioned. To see all things equally is to return again to the natural state. Without any reason, therefore, you cannot judge or compare. Stopping is movement without motion. Movement is still without stopping. Since both are not established, how can one be such? When you find out the ultimate consummation, you do not keep rules and models. When the mind in harmony is equanimous, all doings come to rest. When doubts are thoroughly cleared, true belief is directly in tune. Nothing at all stays. There's nothing to fix in mind. When open and clear, spontaneously aware, you aren't wasting mental effort. The realm that is not an object of thought cannot be assessed by conscious feelings. The reality realm of true suchness has no other or self. If you want to tune in right away, just speak of non-duality. Non-duality is all the same. There's nothing it doesn't contain. The wise ones of the 10 directions all enter this source. The source is neither expansive nor contracted. 1 instant is 10,000 years. There is nowhere that it is not. The 10 directions are right before the eyes. The small is the same as the large. You forget all about the bounds of objects. The largest is the same as the small. You do not see beyond it. Being is none other than non-being. Non-being is none other than being. Anything that is not like this definitely should not be kept. One is all is one. If you can just be like this, what ruminations will not end? The true mind is non-dual. Non-duality makes the mind true. There is no more way to talk of it. It is not past or future or present.